And for more on this, I'm joined by the CEO and founder of Slack, Stewart Butterfield. Stewart, it's great to have you with me this morning. Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
What was behind your move this week to open up work messaging to all users across different companies?
Well, for the last year and a bit, we've been rolling out features of what we call Slack Connect. And the intention here is not like email or text messaging where anyone can message anyone else, but for the people you work with who happen to be employed by someone else. So you can imagine if you're an account executive at a creative agency, it might be a marketer at one of your customer companies. It could be someone in the finance team working with their auditors. It could be outside counsel. It could be contractors or consultants. And there tend to be people who work with you really closely, but are outside of your organizational boundaries. And for those relationships, Slack Connect has proved enormously successful. So we ended this year with 74,000 paid customers using Slack Connect. That's up 130% from last year. But the density of the network has increased tremendously as well. That's grown 245%. So there's now about 700,000 what we call connected endpoints. So this latest move is to open that up for individuals to connect directly outside of the context of shared channels.
I'm sure the expectation too that it will drive user growth, it will drive engagement as well. The company did backtrack yesterday. There were concerns that there might be abusive messages sent in those initial invitations. I want you to explain what happened there and why you decided to quickly correct that.
This was a little bit of an unforced error on our part. And unfortunately, because the feature was about direct messaging, there was a lot of totally understandable confusion conflating the process for inviting. So Slack Connect DMs are double opt-in. Both sides have to give permission. Either side can revoke that permission at any time. So there's a lot of management features, a lot of security features built in. Unfortunately, the way that you send invitations can include arbitrary text and customizing the invitation. And that was the thing that we changed. We removed that from the invitation process.
And that is going to stick, I assume, going forward?
Yeah.
Let's take a look more at some of these growth numbers that you were mentioning. You have this pending deal with Salesforce awaiting DOJ approval. As we await for that, we can take a look at your growth globally. Half of daily active users actually outside of North America. Paid customer growth worldwide up 93% in the past year in Australia, up 138% in France, 100% in Germany, 94% in the UK, and 88% here in the US. How is that deal with Salesforce going to help you elevate those numbers?
Well, I think the simple way and the kind of traditional way is we have some software. They have many more salespeople than us, and so they can help us sell more software. But in the process, the negotiation or back and forth principally with Brett Taylor, the COO of Salesforce, who I've known for about 15 years, we share a really common vision about the future platforms that are going to be driving work. And this might sound a little silly to some people, but what we talked about is trying to achieve a 1 + 1 = 7 outcome. And that means it's discontinuous. It's not just we get to sell more software, we get to transform the way that people work. We're seeing this proliferation of business software product categories. We're seeing more and more use of software by people, more and more money spent by companies on software per employee per year. All of those are kind of going up and to the right. And I think that's good because people wouldn't buy the software unless it had a positive impact on their productivity. But the fragmentation of attention to all these different systems can be really problematic. And since communication is the most fundamental thing that people do no matter what, having this communication layer to tie everything together, I think will be transformational.
So 7 is an arbitrary number that basically represents endless bounds, it sounds like, versus 7 new product categories, for instance.
Yeah.
Okay, fascinating. So where does it stand, to your knowledge, the DOJ approval from an antitrust perspective with this new administration on the deal with Salesforce?
Well, I mean, we're very confident it will be approved, and we're happy to work with the regulators. We've received approval from a number of jurisdictions around the world. It's a bit of a complicated process, but I think the confidence in its approval comes from the fact that we don't have any overlapping products, and we've always been very committed to an open ecosystem. We partner with nearly every other software maker in the world, so there's no real danger.
Now, if the Salesforce deal does not close, what is your path forward? As we know, Microsoft has extremely large scale and is competing directly with your products.
Well, we're still an independent, publicly traded company. I'm still the CEO, and until the deal closes, we're 100% on that path. Look, this last year for us was obviously huge. We crossed $1 billion run rate. We had more than $1 billion in billings. We had 43% revenue growth and 4 straight quarters of profitability. Free cash flow profitability. We also saw enormous acceleration in the number of paid customers. So we added 46,000 this year compared to 22,000 last year. And those customers are the basis for the future growth. So we're in an incredibly strong position. But as the kind of light at the end of the tunnel appears with respect to the pandemic, my hope is that we, not just Slack, not just our customers, but kind of the broadest and most inclusive sense of we see this as an opportunity to reimagine how we work. Because obviously there was things we liked about the old world. And while no one would want to relive 2020, I think there's things that people liked about this world. They liked the additional flexibility, the not having to commute, the possibility of spending more time with their family. And I think it's time, with the pressure off a little bit, to reimagine the processes that we use to give people more flexibility and to kind of take advantage of the best of both worlds.
Okay, Slack, a wildly popular stay-at-home stack when this pandemic happened just a year ago. Stewart, 1 year later, what are the lessons that you've learned, and how are you working to keep your relevance in a post-pandemic world?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I think there's so many different factors here that end up getting confused. So before the pandemic, we had some people who worked remotely, but they had, set up a nice home office, a comfortable chair. They also could go for a walk whenever they felt like it and go sit at a cafe and watch people go by. And at night they could go to a bar and have a drink or go to a movie. Without the amenities of regular life, I think it feels very different to be working from home. And the desire, I don't think, is for most people to physically work from inside of their house, but to have the flexibility. And so that means you want to work for Slack, but you don't want to live in the Bay Area, or you want to live in a city where we don't already have an office. You want to live closer to family. You want to live closer to nature. Suddenly now that's possible. And I think that'll make an enormous difference. So the thing to think about it is not just remote work or distributed work, but really a shift from physical first to digital first. And we have so many tactics and techniques that are held over from the last 150 years since the birth of the modern corporation that are really based on being in person with our fellow humans. In a world where we have all this digital technology, we see the attention shifting, the amount of importance given to the digital infrastructure of an organization to become equivalent or even exceeding that of the physical infrastructure. And that's something that I think will drive growth for decades to come.
We were showing a chart there of the stack over the past year. Again, 1 year ago this time, we were all going into lockdown across this country. 1 year later, the stack up 56% with a huge spike that we saw at the end of November when that deal with Salesforce, $27 billion deal, was announced first by the Wall Street Journal. Stewart, something that we're doing here at Cheddar is we're asking major executives like yourself how you are taking your company into the future of 2021 and what you are looking forward to this year. What's your answer to that?
Well, we're really trying to kind of live up to the line of what we're telling people publicly, and really trying to invest in taking a step back and examining how we work and finding ways to improve that. And I think the biggest one is no one can tolerate another year of doing 8 hours a day on video calls. And while kind of real-time synchronous conversational face-to-face-ish meetings, I think are important, there's an enormous number of those meetings that could be asynchronous. So we're looking really at any process that today must be synchronous. In other words, everyone has to stop what they're doing and perform this activity at the same time and make that asynchronous, because it's not just about giving people more flexibility because they like to work in the early morning or the late evening, or they have childcare responsibilities or whatever. It's also about making it more inclusive of time zones, giving people more of a time to give kind of reasoned consideration. If we can make it easy enough for people to do this kind of work asynchronously, then I think we'll see a huge shift from synchronous to asynchronous.
That flexibility still with the connection that so many of us crave, and that has been challenging this past year during a pandemic. Stewart Butterfield, great to have you. I do hope you'll come back. Stewart's the co-founder and CEO of Slack.